But yeah, we were talking about the USA. Now, the whole situation, Jason, honestly speaking, I will repeat myself again just to emphasize how important it is that a world without the United States of America will not be a nice, juicy place to live in. And this is something people have a problem on the understanding, especially people who are on the. Now, I personally don't have anything against them, but this is something the Eurasianist agenda is blind to. Like, what do you think will happen to Russia, which is a regional power, let's say in a situation where America is out of the picture, and then you have an increasingly aggressive China, which doesn't have any cultural relation or any other point which relates it to Russia or the West of the West?
Look, this is why in world state of emergency, as I'm sure you're aware, I proposed an alliance between America, Europe, Russia, Iran, India, and Japan against China and against Sunni Islam. So I don't see any reason why the United States of America and Russia cannot be aligned and evolve together toward a shared Promethean future. There is much in the Russian philosophical tradition that is Promethean in spirit, because you have to consider that besides the Russian cosmists, who were very Promethean in their outlook, particularly Konstantin Tsiolkovsky, who actually worked with the Soviet government despite his eugenics advocacy. They cut him slack, and he was basically the Jack Parsons of the Soviet rocket program. Besides the Russian cosmist version of Prometheism that you see in Russia, you also have the Promethean impulse in Marxism. And there was a lot in Soviet communism that, and I know people on the right are going to be rubbed the wrong way by this, but there was a lot in Soviet communism that was Promethean, and it really futurist and developmental in nature. I mean, they had their own titanic vision of what they called the new man, a kind of Soviet version of the Übermensch that they were.
Absolutely. It was one of the most anthropocentric ideologies ever to exist, and it is a literal fusion between this cosmism and Marxist doctrine. On the other hand, you're absolutely spot on there.
So I don't see any reason why Russia cannot regain that and continue to evolve in a Promethean trajectory together with America, and then they converge at some point in a future, Prometheus world society. We have to ally against China and against the Sunni Caliphate. These are the two great enemies of everything Promethean that, I am affirming and calling for us to base our future society on. And in that conflict, Iran is also very important. And I've spent a lot of time, belaboring that point, that even the current Islamic Republic of Iran can evolve in a nationalist direction toward a resurgence of Persian identity, combined with a Shiaism that sets Iran into an antagonistic stance with the Sunni Caliphate, with the new rising Sunni Caliphate. Even under the Islamic Republic, Iran can evolve into a type of society and nation that would be allied with both Russia and the West against Sunni Islam and China.
That absolutely makes sense. I think that people are underestimating China. A lot of people will tell you, I have the notion that they just want to be left alone to devise their own agendas. They're not aggressive. No, it's actually one of the worst aggression possible. It's a subliminal aggression. It's in a way, honestly, if we lived in a parallel society where we have a situation of China taking over as a world hegemon, right? Without any other alternative poles in dictating geopolitical occurrences and what will be happening internally around different civilizational blocks, I think we're talking about a ruthless, technocratic, cold, void of any metaphysical meaning end of history. That's going to be it pretty much.
You're absolutely right.
Because imagine that situation, Jason, with them engineering themselves genetically in accordance with all the technological advancements when they become a different species biologically in 100 years or so. It's the end of history.
I agree.
And I'm not talking in the Fukuyama end of history sense. I'm talking about, if you're familiar with the alternative history fiction of Sterling, the Draka Domination trilogy. This is the type of end of history I'm talking about.
They will become a hive-minded, inhuman species that diverges from Homo sapiens. Chinese culture is extremely collectivistic, and if you imagine, that they would tinker with various elements of human personality using genetic engineering, they will wind up emphasizing the collectivist traits that are characteristic of their civilization. And on the other hand, we're dealing with, one of the most high IQ populations on the planet as it is. It's possible to increase IQ by about 15 points per generation just using embryo selection without even genetic engineering, just using pre-implantation embryo screening and, PGD, pre-implantation genetic diagnosis of embryos. You can select for the highest IQ child that you would have with your prospective mate by 15 points per generation. And, if the Chinese start to do that in the next 10 years, I don't know, by the second half of the 21st century, you're going to be dealing with a 140, 160, IQ average population. And how are we going to outcompete them at that point? We have to nip it in the bud.
And can you imagine the vista of opportunities for personality disorders being developed from such a psychological state, something like which makes contemporary sociopathy and psychopathy like a child's play? We're talking about acting as different species, exploiting aggressively without any kind of moral limitation. We're not talking moral limitation from a Judeo-Christian perspective here. I'm talking about slave master morality, literally. Okay.
You talk about Chinese and slave master. I really shouldn't say this, but I'll say it. I have a tendency to do that. The Africans thought they had it bad with European colonialists. I don't know if you've been watching the African reaction to Chinese business ventures in Africa. Oh my gods. I mean, the Africans, they realize what racism is and what oppression really means. The way the Chinese are colonizing Africa right now and treating the native population, it makes the European colonialists in Africa, frankly, look like beneficent, humanitarians.
So we're talking Joseph Conrad on steroids, basically.
That's right. Let me just leave it at that. And, when you talk to the Chinese about what their views are of the Africans that they are working on these projects with, power, energy generation, mining projects, railroad projects. Oh God, you want to find some racism? Go talk to the Chinese about what they really think of the Africans they're working with right now. So yes, it's very dangerous to allow the Chinese to have a monopoly on these singularity level technologies, whether it's genetic engineering, AI, or whatever else.
Yeah, and somehow they have suppressed any kind of cultural subversion by, it is a one-party totalitarian state. China is a totalitarian state. Anyone thinking otherwise has to recheck his ABCs in political science, right? But realistically speaking,
China is a totalitarian state in a way that is not even possible in the West. In the West, you can have political totalitarianism, but you're always going to be resisting the Western individual. Western civilization is in the end a civilization based around the human individual. And this is one of the reasons why Dugin, for example, tries to distinguish Eurasia from the West, which he says is, suffers from a kind of Faustian individualism. So in the West, however totalitarian a political structure becomes, it will eventually be undone by the rebellious individual. In China, totalitarianism has a much more organic character because it is grounded in the personality profile of the Chinese population on average and is in tune with the collectivist tendencies of their culture going back to antiquity.
This is where Francis Fukuyama explicitly elaborates on this question in his Magnum Muslims, The Origins of Political Order and Political Decay. he points out that China has been, like, the way they interpreted, they basically adopted Marxism to an already existing Confucian framework. That's exactly what they did. And people will tend to talk like, yeah, but this is the new China. No, this is a China with different aesthetics. China has always been what you actually see now. And this is something people are quite ignorant towards, not knowing enough about state building and institutions in China.
Yeah, that's right. I agree with you entirely.